Time to talk Buckeyes, folks. You know the day and the time, 11 a.m. Eastern time on a Wednesday with these two. Steve Hellwagon right next to me, of course, Bucknuts, 247 Sports, Tony Girdman, BuckeyeHuddle.com. Buckeye Weekly's the podcast. It's a good one. Get there on a regular basis. Guys, how we doing today?
Doing well.
Doing great.
The Ohio State coaching staff and administration did not check with us last week. We had this full-length discussion about Matt Patricia and other possibilities at defensive coordinator. And then, boom, they cut us off at the knees. And they announced one Matt Patricia as the defensive coordinator, which was met, I don't know what the response that you two saw out there, with some furling of the eyebrows and so, yeah, with a little angst out there. And I get it. We hit on some of those points last week in regards to there's always the nuts and bolts of, okay, how productive were these units that particular coach led at whatever level versus what else have we heard about this guy and how does it translate? So, Tony, I will start with you in terms of Matt Patricia. Now that it's out there, now that he's the choice, did this seem like a home run hire? It does not to me, but at some point, whether you're following your favorite NFL team or college football team, because we're in the age of NFL type roster management and so forth, at some point you say, I didn't like that pick, but do I trust the process and the people in charge?
Yeah, and you know how much leeway do the people in charge have? And right now, Ryan Day's got quite a bit of it, but I don't know that Matt Patricia was at the top of anybody's board, and it's certainly before anybody heard that he was a possibility. Like, I don't know if he was on any hot boards, which is something we've talked about before, why I hate hot boards, because you can throw a bunch of names, but then the actual names will show up after the fact. And, you know, Matt Patricia, when that came down, I think there's some recency bias in that everybody just remembers him as the Lions head coach, which didn't go well, 13-29-1. Fired 11 games into his third season. Lots of people in the Detroit organization still do not care for this man. And when I say do not care for him, I'm putting it lightly. They do not like him at all. And so there's some of that is still out there. And the thing is, like, these are all valid reasons for concern. It's been 20 years since he was in college working as a grad assistant. So, like, what kind of recruiter is he? And I would assume he's better than Jim Knowles, because Jim Knowles was not much of a recruiter. So, you know, they're probably not necessarily looking for a recruiter per se, because one, he doesn't have a position to coach. Two, you've got good recruiters at all of the positions, basically. So, you know, that may not be as big of an issue. So yeah, you hear from people in Northwest Ohio, like, you know, just folks at the Blade, that do not see this as a good hire. I think if you just look at the fact that he won 2 Super Bowls as a defensive coordinator, like that qualifies him to be a defensive coordinator at a place like Ohio State. But then you take that away by saying, well, it was Bill Belichick's. You know, he was Bill Belichick's defensive coordinator, so are you going to really give him any credit? But the fact is, like, Bill Belichick kept him around for a very, very long time. And then so people are like, well, why didn't he take him with him to North Carolina? And it's like, well, he brought his son instead. So, you know, forgive Bill Belichick for choosing his son over Matt Patricia. But I don't know how this is going to go. I think, one, he's going to have to improve as a people person, and maybe he has in his time off, because that's going to be a very big thing, not just for recruiting, but for the coaches that you're working with. And you know, we've all heard the rumblings and the rumors and about some of the dysfunction on the defensive staff, because Jim Knowles couldn't necessarily get everybody on the same page. Like, as Ryan Day just gone and done that again with somebody who doesn't get along with people. So I think Matt Patricia has also had to learn from his mistakes, and he's made them. So you would assume he's not going to do the same thing he did in areas where he failed. And so I have the hot take of being like, I don't know. I'm going to find out. That's how I'll know whether this was a good hire or a bad hire, is I'm going to let it play out and see if it's a good hire or a bad hire.
Excuse me. I agree with 100% with that. I think that you have to give Ryan Day the benefit of the doubt. His hit rate on these hires is about 75, 80%, I would say. There have been a couple of them along the way where we've had to scratch our head, or he's had to do a correction a year or two later. And mea culpa, I shouldn't have done that. But otherwise, I think that he's earned the benefit of the doubt with this. And I don't know if there was any previous connection between Patricia, who's been in the pros for 20 years, and Ryan Day. Perhaps somebody knows somebody, that connected the two one way or the other. And I just don't know what that conduit could have been. Obviously he coached in New England, and that's where Day's roots are from, the Connecticut, area there in New England. So perhaps that had something to do with it. I don't know, but Patricia is a guy who it seems like was kind of out of the game this year, kind of assessing his options, and people have kind of held some of the things against him, like filling in as the offensive coordinator at one place and the defensive coordinator somewhere else in midseason. I mean, with failed teams, you can't hold those situations against him. He didn't start with those teams in those positions during training camp. So he was just a placeholder finishing out the season for a team that was playing out the string and probably trying to, dump fuel at the end so they could land the plane and get a high draft pick. So that was, kind of the long and short of that. His head coaching tenure in Detroit did not go well. People there said he did not work and play well with others, did not get along well with some of the players on that team, and kind of had Charlie Weiss syndrome that, you see this is my Super Bowl ring. It's really big. And Bill Belichick, I have Bill Belichick's imprimatur, or however that's said, on me. I am a Bill Belichick disciple. I must ooze great football. And, the fact of the matter is you have to go out there every day and prove it in the NFL and really in college football as well. So we're going to see with Matt Patricia, is he all hat and no cattle, or is he actually a great X's and O's defensive coordinator? We're going to find out. He's going to find out if there's any doubt. He was the defensive coordinator for 2 Super Bowl champions. I know the Blade ran a column about how ludicrous the hire was, and I'm kind of like, he was the defensive coordinator for 2 Super Bowl champions. That's got to count for something. And not only that, at least the one part of the Bill Belichick, tree thing, whatever, this aura, this thing that's gone on since the beginning of time, is how to win football games and how to prepare teams to win football games. And he was at the forefront of that for several seasons. So he knows what it takes to put a winner on the field. It just didn't work out for him, obviously, in his time at Detroit when he tried to take some of those attributes and bring it to a roster. Nobody's won at Detroit until this Dan Campbell character showed up there 4 years ago. So I don't necessarily hold Detroit against him. And, we'll see how he does at Ohio State. But I think you gotta go jury out on this until you get a year or two into this. Noel's first year at Ohio State was still a little bit rocky with that terrible Michigan game that they had. Year 2 was outstanding. And year 3, they won the national championship. So, you kind of have to let it play out.
Yeah. As I wrote that day is that, judging somebody off of their inability to win with the Detroit Lions is like judging a person's ability to drive by how many Daytona 500s they've won. It's like, there are scales to these things. And just because somebody didn't win at Detroit doesn't mean they can't be a defensive coordinator for a high level college football program. That being said, I still think it's up in the air. Like I don't think you can say it's a home run because we've got to see it. At least with Jim Knowles, you saw him build a college defense and utilize one. So there's more known there than there is with Patricia. But again, you're the defensive coordinator for 2 Super Bowls. I think that qualifies you. But, there have been plenty of qualified coaches who have failed at many particular jobs.
For one thing, I got to say what's running through my head. Anytime Bill Belichick is named these days, some kind of joke or jab runs through my head related to the other person in the conversation about some 24-year-old girlfriend. That just, I can't get away from that. I think I was late to the party on that whole situation as well. But anyway.
But his coaching tree is bad as well. So that's, I mean, aside from that, but like the football aspect of it as well, like his coaching tree is not good. But also, that is just a bizarre visual.
It is. I am not wielding any judgment whatsoever. I don't know what the perfect age gap is, so we won't go into that. But I just had to say that I find that interesting. So anyway, so North Carolina, Bill Belichick. It's just it's going to be fun to watch and interesting to watch, I will say. Okay, back to Patricia. I kind of run this through what I am now deeming just off the top of my head, but I've been doing this for a while. Kind of the Mac Brown analysis, meaning Mac Brown went to North Carolina the first time. They were horrendous. He lifted them to 10-win seasons his last 2 years, 10-1, 10-2 range. He leaves there, they slide. He goes to Texas. They had a decade of mediocrity. He lifted them to national championship status, 2 national championship games, etc., living in the top 5. He leaves, they drop off the cliff. Goes to North Carolina to a much lesser degree, but still only 5 wins the previous 2 seasons combined. He elevates them to 8-9 wins a season. There we are. So slot in Coach X and look at, was the situation better or worse before he got there? What was it after he left? And then were there any other mitigating circumstances in regards to great personnel hauls to help him or whatever the situation? And I can't say that I can really answer that with Matt Patricia coaching defense. All right, folks, we do appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. We'd love to take your calls. So for overtime, kick us into overtime, $100 with the super chat. And we would love, again, to take your calls, and the comments and questions are welcome. In addition, and we've got Garrison and Ryan doing Ohio State Prime Time every Monday and Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time as well. So keep that in mind. Have we had an announcement of the start of spring practice yet?
March 17th for 4 weeks. So spring game is then, I believe, on April 12th. So it's going to be a condensed 4-week thing. And so we've gotten the spring practice schedule and everything. We don't know exactly. I don't know if Ryan Day has come out and said exactly what the spring game is going to look like at this point, but we'll get the 15 practices, and hopefully we'll be in there for quite a few of them. Usually we get to watch the entire first practice or the first couple of practices, and then a couple of others later on down the road, maybe a couple of Saturdays in there as well.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's important to note is Ryan Day was speaking to an athletic committee, I guess, here recently, and he said that they are going to divide the team into 3 groups: guys who have played, which I would assume would include like Jeremiah Smith, Caleb Downs, and they're going to protect those guys, probably not put them in harm's way much or if at all, just because the season went 3 weeks longer than any other season that they've ever had at Ohio State. So they had so many more practices and a couple, 2-3 extra games than you normally have in a season for a long time there at Ohio State. And then you have guys who have played somewhat, which would probably be backups, guys who need to prove themselves to earn starting positions. There's quite a few guys in that group. I would say anybody who was really on the team this past year but didn't start or didn't play heavy play count is going to be in that group, and they're going to get a ton of work, obviously. And then you have the 20 to 25, I think it's 27 mid-year enrollees, which were like 21 freshmen and 5 or 6 transfers. I should know this because they just did a story about it when they gave us the list a week or 2 later. And it's a great group. I mean, you have like Max Clare, the tight end, coming in from Purdue. and then most of the incoming class with Tavian St. Clair at quarterback, and all those other guys, Devin Sanchez at corner, and up and down the line, Riley Pettyjohn at linebacker, the two new offensive tackles who are college transfers, the new defensive end from the FCS ranks, and everybody else that is a mid-year enrollee. They'll be in the third group. And, while you say, oh, they're going to get a ton of work, you also have to kind of acclimate them to what's expected at the college level. So I'm sure they're putting those guys through their paces right now in the winter program to get them in shape so that they could play football. You don't want any of those people in their first, few practices or whatever coming up lame with injuries just because they weren't ready for the intensity of what it takes to practice at the Big Ten level. So, or let's just say it, guys, a national championship level, we have to invoke that every chance we get, because you have to kind of pinch yourself. They really did win the national championship, even though, nobody seems to want to give them credit for it. So I look at it that they're going to get a ton of work in this spring. As Tony said, instead of a 5-week period with 15 practices, they're going to condense it into a 4-week period. So what that looks like, probably 3 practices 1 week, 4-4-4, with the last one on a Saturday to be kind of, what they're calling the spring showcase. And no, they have not revealed what the format. They may not know what the format for that's going to be until the week of, just depending on what needs to be done work-wise, who needs the work, how many plays they want to run. But I think you're going to get to see the guys in those last 2 groups play quite a bit of actual football, I would think, on that day, whether it'll be tackle to the ground football or not. It's not about you. It's about them. So, go, don't go, watch, don't watch. It doesn't matter. They're going to do what they think is best for the football team.
And the other thing, like, we can't just say, well, it's a 15 spring practices. Nobody wants to get hurt. They're going to take it easy. You're still competing for, you're searching for a starting quarterback. So there are going to be serious things here with Julian Sand and Lincoln Keenholz and even true freshman Tavian St. Clair getting reps. So these have to be real, legitimate, important reps. But also, I don't know that they need to involve Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate all that much, even though I think anytime you get an opportunity to watch Jeremiah Smith in practice, it's fun. It's fun to do because he's always going to do something crazy like everybody got to see in games. But, you need to give Sayan and Lincoln Keenholz the best opportunity to look their best. Now, what the coaches will tell you is like, well, as long as they make the right reads and they go where they should, it doesn't really matter if the ball gets caught. They get a plus on that on their grading system. So, they'll tell you they don't need to have Carnell Tate or Jeremiah Smith. That it could be Quincy Porter and Demarion Witten out there running, and you can assess the quarterback just fine. I think people at Penn State might disagree. Like when you look at trying to assess Drew Aller, what would he look like with real wide receivers? And he'd look a lot better probably. So this can't just be a silly thing where you just go through the motions, because there are jobs to be won. You're putting together an offensive line. You're getting these guys integrated. You're trying to figure out who your starting running back is. And to answer one of the questions, I think from Rusty Jesse, when will the starting spots be determined this spring or in preseason camp? And that all depends on the position, because there's no way Ryan Day is going to name a starter after spring for quarterback. And the interesting thing about that is that, Lincoln Keenholz has said he'll have to reassess his situation after spring. And there's going to be nothing definitive, just like there wasn't anything definitive in the spring of 2018 when Joe Burrow wanted to know if he was going to be the starter or not. And Urban Meyer told him, I can't name a starter right now. So Joe Burrow was like, okay, I'll see you. I'm off to LSU. So some of these jobs aren't going to be known. And then some may be won by default because players are going to transfer out. So, some of the jobs, like, I don't even know, would they name like Ethan Onyanwa, the starting left tackle out of spring after just 15 spring practices, even though he's a 5th-year senior. So like he should win one of the jobs. They may not say anything. It's one of these things, watch what they do. And if the same guy is repping first all throughout practice, then there's a pretty good chance he's going to be a starter. provided they don't go into the portal and try to replace that guy.
How many starters were lost off?
I think 15. 15 is a good round number. That's the number of guys who are going to be at the combine. I mean, that includes 2 running backs. So, you kind of consider Quinshawn Judkins and Trevion Henderson as co-starters there. So really 14 positions, I guess. I mean, I could count it up, but really the only returnee on there's 3 guys back on the offensive line, theoretically. And then on defense, there's 1 linebacker and 2 or 3 guys in the secondary, and that's it. So
I've got it at 16 with I think 8 on each side of the ball.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you got 2 wide receivers back too, I guess. So that's 5 on offense and 3 back on defense, something like that.
Folks, we appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. We have an added addition to what we do in answering your comments and questions. If you would love to call us, we would love to push this into overtime with your contributions. So keep that in mind. And we've got an Ohio State show every Mondays and Thursdays, prime time with Ryan and Garrison. So it sounds like the offensive line, per usual, is the biggest question mark, unit that needs the most work. All of that business.
I say yes and no. I think that the offensive tackles are completely unproven. We don't know if those 2 guys coming in from the outside, one of them is from Rice, and where's the other one from?
Minnesota.
And I don't think he started at Minnesota, did he? I mean,
he started about 4 or 5 games towards the end of the season.
Okay. Their game notes were like trying to read Chinese to me. I could not figure out anything from I don't know if it was Mandarin Chinese or some other dialect, but it was just not, my eyes were just not matching up with anything. I couldn't find that Daniels had done anything at Minnesota. So if you say so, I believe it. But so we don't know if they're Ohio State caliber offensive tackles. We don't know if anybody who's still on the roster at Ohio State can push those guys in spring practice, because they lost some guys in the transfer portal. So, I think about it. Offensive line, the 3 interior spots are fine. I'm going to mute me here if they're going to carry on, but 3 interior are fine. 2 tackles problem.
Somebody disagrees with you, Steve.
Well, and the thing is, so they are replacing 4 starters on the offensive line, but they've got like 4 guys back who have started on the offensive line. So, like Carson Hinsman has started 18 games at center in his career, but is not technically a returning starter, because that would be Seth McLaughlin, or like Seth McLaughlin was the starting center last year, but Carson Hinsman started the last 6 games at center last year, and also like 4, I think, or so 3 or 4 at left guard last year. So like he is not technically a returning starter. And when you're looking at, they have to replace Josh Simmons and Josh Fryer and Seth McLaughlin and Donovan Jackson, but he's almost been a 2-year starter now. So that's one guy, and that's a great thing to have. Austin Sierveld started a handful of games, and Luke Montgomery started towards the end of the season. But I do wonder what you're going to do with those 4 guys at those 3 positions. Like, are they going to rotate the guards again? It worked somehow. Will all 3 of those guys be okay rotating? Will one of them decide, I don't want to do this? But yeah, I'm also with Steve. Like the tackles are the issue. I think Phillip Daniels is ranked like the number 5 tackle in the portal per 24/7. And it's like, he was a redshirt freshman last year who played sparingly and then started towards the end. And it's like, I don't know how you can rank him so high. And then Ethan Onianwa started for 2 years at right tackle at Rice, and then last year started at left tackle. I think he was ranked like the 14th tackle in the portal. And he's really big. He's a mauler, but I think he's going to have to drop some weight to play left tackle at Ohio State. So like these are all question marks. And if other than those 2 guys, you've got like Ian Moore, who worked his way into the 2 deep as a true freshman last year, mainly because of injuries to 3 offensive tackles, and they've lost tackles into the portal. So like they are really thin. Where your backup left tackle is either like Ian Moore or like Deontay Armstrong, who didn't play a single play last year as a true freshman. So they're thin there, and that's why you also wonder if one of these guards moves out to tackle if things don't go well with the two transfers, because all three of the guards of Luke Montgomery, Taker Shabola, and Austin Searveld have played tackle at some time in their point in their careers at Ohio State. So could they do it again if need be? I think there's a lot of things to figure out, but you've got a good base, and it's still a better situation than they were in 2023 when they didn't have Josh Simmons until like May of that year. Because they, as I always tell people, Ohio State left spring ball in 2023 with Josh Fryer as your left tackle and Zen Mahalski as your right tackle. And that's how thin things were. And that's why Ryan Day was so panicked after the spring game talking about the offensive line.
How does he remember this stuff, Steve?
I
think
don't
when we
know.
went back to like 2012, he would tell us who the left and right tackles were coming out of spring.
Yeah, he's uncanny with his ability to recall some of this.
It was a dangerous time. It was a dangerous time to be alive.
Yeah. I just published a story that I can reference here today, looking at the 2024 recruiting class to see who played enough to redshirt and not. It was 23 guys, and it looks like 7 of the 23 guys played enough that they'll be sophomores this coming year. 16 of them, played 4 or fewer games and would redshirt, although one of those, Aaron Noland, has already transferred out to South Carolina. But the guys who played enough to move on to sophomores, obviously Jeremiah Smith, the top wide receiver, if not the top player in the country. I would say he was the MVP of the playoff. Perhaps you could make, he was certainly the MVP of the first 2 rounds of the playoff, but whether he was for the entire playoff, I don't know. Maybe that should go to Will Howard. I don't know, because he seemed to win offensive player of the game a couple of times in there too. James Peoples, the running back, he'll be battling with C.J. Donaldson, the West Virginia transfer this spring, and also Sam Williams-Dixon, who only played in 3 games, was going to transfer out, and last week it seems like made the decision, reverse course, and will come back. So he would be a redshirt freshman. The other guys who played enough were Edric Houston, defensive lineman, Peyton Pierce at linebacker, Aaron Scott and Bryce West at corner, although it seems that West played in 7 games, but 3 of those were in the postseason.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the only ones that count toward this are the first 12. Mm-hmm. So you could play up to 4 of the first 12. I think they let you have the postseason as freebies. So he could still qualify, Bryce West, I think, as a redshirt. And then Jalen McClain, he played in all 16 games, which is amazing. He played 106 snaps on defense, 15 tackles as a freshman, and I think he'll be in the 2 deep at safety, if not a starter, perhaps going forward. So he'll be in the hunt to replace Lathan Ransom. So that was kind of the update on who redshirted. Everybody else who I did not mention redshirted. So a lot of, 15 guys coming back as redshirt freshmen, plus the 20 or 23, 24, or however many true freshmen will be on this team. So you've got close to 40 guys who, basically have never played appreciable snaps at the college level. Almost half your scholarship players, when you look at it in that lens, you see how inexperienced this team will be this coming year.
It is interesting that both Aaron Scott and Bryce West played 7 games last year, but Bryce West, 3 of his, like you said, Steve, came in the postseason. So he's a redshirt freshman, and Aaron Scott is a sophomore, which I'll tell people, like, Tavian St. Clair could play in 4 games this year and then lead Ohio State to a national championship in the postseason and play like 4 games there and still redshirt. So he could lead you to a national title, like do the Cardale Jones thing where you lead him in the playoffs and then still you can redshirt.
This is the kinder, gentler NCAA, which
although if they're going to go to five seasons anyway, then the redshirts will go away, but that's not the way the rule is yet, but it sounds like it's coming.
Yeah. A lot of noise out there about what's coming with the playoff and whether it perhaps could change it even for the 2025 season, although they'd have to have to, really accelerate the planning to do that. But could it go to 14 teams, and could the SEC and Big Ten be assured of 4 spots each? That's kind of interesting talk, but I don't know that I like that. I just don't feel like, a 9-3, Indiana or, Illinois, whoever, for lack of a term, I'm throwing the name of a school in there rather than, specifically, it could be USC or whoever, 9-3, getting in ahead of, maybe an 11-1 Virginia Tech or an 11-1 Kansas State or something like that, just because there just aren't enough spots left for you. I'm sorry, to me that doesn't sound or feel right, but I don't know. Guess we'll cross those bridges when we come to them.
I think one of the things about it that is interesting to me, because it's a new way of doing things, is when they do expand it to 14 or 16 teams, and they are going to, that's just going to happen because it can make more money, is what they do with championship weekends, with the conference championship weekend, because we've seen there's no point in winning the conference championship game anymore. So one of the things that they could do is the first 2 teams in your conference get a bye. They're automatically qualified. They don't get a bye, but they're in. And then you could have the number 3 team in your conference play the number 6 team, and the number 4 team in your conference play the number 5 team, championship weekend, and the winners of those 2 games are in. So essentially the top 6 teams in your conference will make the playoffs. It's just, 4 of those teams are going to be kind of in a playoff game, which, I mean, just imagine, say Ohio State is the 3 seed and Michigan is the 6 seed, and you could have Ohio State hosting Michigan for the playoffs at night in Ohio Stadium, something like that, like the Tennessee game was last year. So there are some interesting things that could happen where you get rid of the conference championship game, and it's like that was never going to happen because they're never going to give up that money. But if you can get 2 games out of it for television purposes, then maybe that's what they'll agree to do, because again, the expanded playoffs with the conference championship game, like what benefit was it for Oregon to have won the Big Ten championship game last year? None.
They got a worse draw than Penn State.
They were punished for it. So what benefit is there to win a conference championship game? It's just like basketball now, basically. In terms
if they're
of
not going to seed it correctly, that's the problem. Penn State should not have been seeded below Boise State, Arizona State, whoever. I mean, that's the problem, is that if you're not going to seed it properly, then it does screw over the one. I mean, that's just the fact of it.
Because we were talking about this when this article came out from Ross Dellinger, we're talking about it on the Buckeye Weekly podcast, though, where if you are playing play-in games, then these also need to be play-out games. So, like, if Ohio State as the 3 seed loses to Michigan as the 6 seed, then Ohio State should be eliminated from the playoffs.
You're gone.
But the thing is,
for you.
But will conferences, will the Big Ten and SEC, who have been clamoring, we want 4 automatic qualifiers, if they were to enact that, then they would only get 4 teams in the playoffs every year, because that number 3 seed is going to be eliminated with a loss. So with the automatic 4 qualifiers as it is, or as they're projecting, like, you could have 7 teams from the Big Ten or 7 teams from the SEC come in. But if these play-in games become play-out games, then you're locked in on the 4, which then allows all of the other conferences to come in and get some spots. So they'd love to have it. I just have a hard time believing that the Big Ten and the SEC, while demanding that they get at least 4 in every time, would be okay with limiting themselves to only 4 teams every time.
Well, I kind of like your format, because it adds some urgency to those games. They mean something, and it rewards 1 and 2 for having a great season. So, that, and 1 gets a trophy, or, if 1 and 2 are tied, I suppose both of them would get credit. You're going back to determining your Big Ten champion on regular season record, which is kind of interesting. Okay, so the Big Ten and the SEC do it this way. What are the ACC and the Big 12 and Mountain West? How are they doing it? Are they just going to continue to play 1 versus 2 and only get their one guaranteed spot. I mean, you can't guarantee those leagues 4 spots too, because that's 20 spots for 5 leagues. How do you know, what do you do there?
They would be guaranteed 2 each. The Big 12 and the ACC would be guaranteed 2 each. So they could also do like the play-in thing. So then, it's again, like they would have essentially 4 teams, whatever, making it to the playoffs if they wanted to add more, or maybe the 1 seed gets the auto qualifier,
And 2 plays 3.
Yeah. Where it's like you're expanding the playoffs for your conference, even though they're not actually playoff teams, but they are in their mind.
It's
they're
the
in the
ACC play-in game. It's the Mountain
Exactly.
West play-in game. Yeah.
So,
That's interesting. That has some interesting thought to it. Plus, it does accentuate the regular season. When Ohio State beats Michigan, they both come in 8-0 in the conference, and Ohio State beats Michigan in that last game to go 9-0 and wins the Big Ten outright. That is an accomplishment, and it puts focus on the regular season championship, which makes every game along the way a championship game. So, I was asked in my chat last night, how did the playoff go? As somebody who attended all 4 games, just in the general sense of, was it supported? I think there was a lot of first time through it type situation where people geeked out and said, I'm going to max my credit card out and go to all 4 of these freaking games. And they did, or they went to 3 of them or whatever. I mean, obviously Tennessee was a home game, so that wasn't quite as bad. All you had to do was pay for the tickets and drive down to the stadium. But, and as we had to do, stop at Tractor Supply and buy $200 worth of cold weather gear for my 4 family members so that they didn't, freeze their behinds off. But I digress. I think there was a lot of first-timeism to this, that you had to be a part of this the first go-through. And I think going forward, I just don't think people are going to treat it maybe as special as this. I mean, maybe if it's Nebraska and your team hasn't been in the forefront of college football in 30 years, that you geek out and max out your credit card and try to go to all 3 or 4 games that your team is playing. But I just don't know that Ohio State fans are gonna log in for this. And I know this is a terrible thought. My first 2 years doing this, Ohio State played in the Citrus Bowl, 94, 95, and they have not been back there to my recollection, going on 30 years. If they go 9-3 this year, and it is within the realm of possibility with a first-year quarterback and a road game at Washington, a road game at Wisconsin, a road game at Michigan, a home game with Texas, home game with Penn State. I mean, those are 5 pretty tough games. You go 2-3 in those 5 games, you're 9-3, no playoff for you. You're going to the Capital One Bowl, just like whoever played in it this year. Was it Illinois and whoever? But that 30-year anniversary, that'd be something.
As I've said before, like, I don't know that the same 25,000 Ohio State fans need to go to all games. Like, you can spread out the postseason to 100,000 Ohio State fans and let them get the tickets. But the fans that travel are generally like the same group of, like, I go to every game, and so there is some picking and choosing when you've got to go to all of these, because the Rose Bowl is a crazy expensive trip, and that just becomes one where it's like, well, do you want to splurge for that one, or do you want to, like, now that I've been there, I don't need to go again. I'll wait until after that. So I think there's some decisions that everybody's gonna have to make about that. In terms of the the play and stuff, I will say, like, one of the downsides is, if it had been this past year, like, you would have had, based on the standings, like, Oregon is in, and either Indiana, let's say Indiana is in, then Penn State is playing Iowa, and Ohio State is playing Illinois to get in. And Iowa, who is not even ranked by the committee, is playing for, a playoff spot. So, like, do you want a non-top 25 team in the playoffs? It's like, well, if you don't, then, Penn State could have beaten them. So there are issues where you're trying to find the best 16 teams, but now you've got this number 27 carpetbagger coming in by the Iowa Hawkeyes into the playoffs. So that is like one of the downsides to expanding it within the conference, is that you could end up with somebody that I think everybody agrees isn't that good, but then they got to prove it on the field by beating somebody that everybody agrees is.
I agree with what Lisa says here. The playoff goes way too long into January. They should move it up. The ratings for the national championship game on a Monday night were not good. Now, I think some of that had to do with the fact that Ohio State, I don't recall the exact score. Was it like 34-8 or 34-11 or I don't know, 34-13 or whatever? Ohio State got out to a huge lead, and then Notre Dame scored the last 2 touchdowns or whatever it was to make it a competitive game. But I think that that impacted the ratings certainly. In a perfect world, you'd play, those games. I mean, January 1 is January 1. It could be, they're never going to be doing it on a Sunday. If it's Sunday, January 1, you play on Monday. But if it's, any other day of the week, you play it on January 1. All the other playoff games need to be on Friday or Saturday. I think that's just, or, if like this year, the championship game was on MLK Day, if that could have been on Sunday with MLK Day on Monday, that works too. But NFL probably had a playoff primetime game on Sunday night that, I think at some point, college football just has to say to the NFL, this is what we're doing, guys. And don't kowtow to them. Just do it when you want to do it and let them adapt. If they don't move their game off your spot, then, oh, well, we split the audience. They'll learn eventually. The NFL will learn eventually that, they can move it 3 hours one direction and not kill themselves.
Well, first of all, the NFL is not splitting the audience with anyone. They're splitting it 80-20. And we ran into that this season. So Clemson, Texas, and SMU and Penn State played opposite NFL games, not even NFL playoff games, just NFL regular season games. And they got trampled, like roughly 15 million to 6 million range. I would say college football needs to avoid the NFL as much as possible. But that said, the NFL has infringed upon college football. So the NFL is spread out. So this is not a college football issue in terms of them or the college football entity pushing its product into all these NFL windows. Certainly college football has stayed away from Sunday. This is about the NFL pushing its way. Now, when we were growing up, we started to get these NFL games the last 2 weekends of the season, and this is phenomenal. College football's over. It's December. You get 2 NFL games. You get a doubleheader on Saturday, and the NFL rightfully stayed away from college football. But now the NFL is just spreading out everywhere, playing whenever they want, and the NFL of course, college football has to deal with that. But they met the NFL head on last year, and it wasn't real pretty. Now, they didn't have the most attractive matchups, although Texas Clemson is pretty formidable, or the most attractive network for people to be able to find them when there is no college football played on TNT the entire season. People are not apt to be like, oh, TNT, we're for college football games.
Yeah, at least TNT had the good sense to just say, okay, ESPN, you produce it, and we'll put the little circle down in the lower right-hand corner.
Very true.
Yeah.
The NFL also went out to beat that weekend, because let's remember those 2 games were Houston at Kansas City, and Pittsburgh at Baltimore. So like they did this in a predatory manner. Like we are not going to, like, they wanted to harm college football. And that's my problem with the NFL is they are out to harm college football when college football keeps them going. And they have no desire to be like, you know what, we'll throw, like they could have put the Giants at the Falcons on that day, because that was a Sunday game. You could have had Tennessee at Indianapolis. You could have had Arizona at Carolina. Those could have been Saturday games. Instead, like, no. We want the eyeballs. We don't want people watching college football. I don't get it. It's you didn't have to go and do that, and they felt they did.
Yeah, the synergy between the two levels of play has worked well for generations. I don't know why the NFL needs to wield its might.
The same reason the SEC and the Big Ten are wielding their might against everybody else. It's because they want the money, and
because they can.
Damn anybody else, right?
And I'm not going to go into a big soliloquy about the playoff format. I'll just say that I hate the automatic qualifier, or not the automatic qualifiers, the auto bids, or the set number of minimum out of the SEC and the Big Ten. I just believe a committee's been entrusted, which I don't like the committee. I'm not saying the committee doesn't do a good job. I think the committee, for as much as I rail on the concept of having a committee select teams, I don't like that. They've done a decent job. They've done a better than decent job.
They set a precedent this year. They set a precedent this year that they weren't going to penalize losers of the conference championship games, because Penn State and whoever lost that game, Texas didn't get downrated too badly. I mean, you could have made a case Ohio State should have been a higher seed than Penn State, but whatever. So if they're going to be consistent with that, then now we know the lay of the land going forward, that there is no real risk in going and losing that game, other than you have to play an extra game under this current format. So
there's no risk, but what's the benefit?
Well, yeah, if they go to 16 teams, there is no benefit. There is zero benefit. I mean, other than you're one and get to host 16, I suppose. You get to host 8-4 team, I guess.
All 4 teams with byes lost, but of course, that's kind of
two of them weren't favored though. So
exactly.
I mean,
3 of them weren't favored. Yeah, they were all these were all bad matchups for that, and of course the byes were because of the ACC and the automatic qualifiers and the auto byes from winning your conference. But so it would be interesting to see what a bye, what benefit there actually is. But since they're probably going to go to 16 teams, there won't be any byes to worry about anyway.
Tony Petitti had this job for only a couple of weeks, and he certainly gave us a huge hint. And I talked about this at the time, and I'm sure others did as well. I just didn't know exactly what was going on, but he basically said, we're going to maximize the Big Ten brand by playing the best teams against the best teams in mid to late October and throughout November. So we're going to have better games on the field. We're also going to maximize our playoff positioning. We're going to get as many teams into the Big Ten, from the Big Ten into the playoff as possible. And I thought, well, those are contradictory. That can't happen. But I sat on that thought for about 10 seconds and thought, well, something's up. They're going to figure it out, because we got to make more money in the regular season with better matchups, but also say, you know what? We got 8-4 teams, 9-3 teams in the playoff from the SEC and the Big Ten. So be it. Yeah. I just think that if you've entrusted this committee, they need to go ahead and select the best teams, because they've been able to do that, or the teams that have earned it for 11 years now, and not have this crazy, you got to hit a max of, the 4-4 for the SEC and the Big Ten. If the Big Ten and the SEC truly prove to be the best leagues, which they should, I would be shocked if we're sitting here in 3 years and the Big 12 is arguably the best conference in college football this year. Those are the 2 best leagues. They'll prove it on the field. Just let the process play out.
By this point last year, I'd already done my mock TV draft, because there was nothing to talk about in the off season. And somebody said, boy, it must be a slow news week over there to be trying to project the TV slots for the upcoming season. And, we'll see how Fox can get 8 Ohio State games, or how Ohio State can get 8 noon starts. We already know Texas at Ohio State, Michigan and Ohio State, and Penn State, Ohio State are all going to be noon on Fox. Those will be picks 1, 2, and 3, you think, in the draft. And then I would hope CBS would, after having a terrible slate of games this past year, would get the next pick, the first pick between them and NBC, and, go from there. But from the fan standpoint, and the way TV has dominated, the discussion, it's I don't know if the good outweighs the bad. I mean, Here's one. Ohio State had to play Washington last week at 8:30 Eastern time in Columbus. There might have been 7,000 people at the game just because it was such a late start on a weeknight. And then they are going to play at USC or at UCLA next week, midweek on Wednesday night, I think, and it's at 10:30 p.m. Eastern time. Ohio State, an Eastern time zone school, is going to play a regular season game at, a conference game at 10:30 p.m. on a work school night. So, all in the name of progress, guys, all in the name of progress.
Hey, Steve, I remember having to stay up and watch Jim Jackson play against Harold Miner at USC back in like 1992 or 93 or so,
Yep.
92. And
that was a late start.
That was a late start. Came down to a final missed shot at the end by
Yep.
Jimmy, I believe, and USC got the win.
Yep, I remember that too.
Yakov is here with us. We appreciate you, Yakov. You have financed the show. With a healthy Keith Byers, the 1985 team wins the national championship, ? I think that's a bit of a stretch.
Yeah, I don't remember who won it in 85. Was that like an Oklahoma or somebody?
Oklahoma beat Penn State in the Orange Bowl.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you had Chris Carter, Chris Spielman coming back from the Rose Bowl team. Jim Carsados was in his first year as starting quarterback full-time. He had started a game or two when Tom Zach had been hurt, I think, in 84. But I think that, healthy Keith Byers, that's dynamite right there. Again, I don't know. Michigan had an awfully good team as well with Harbaugh at quarterback. So
finished number 2.
Yeah. So it would have been something. I'll say that. They did beat Iowa, who was number 1 at the time. That was one heck of a day. I was playing high school basketball. I was a senior in high school, and I'm from Circleville. We played a scrimmage at Bloom Carroll that day. So we started the day at Bloom Carroll, played that. We're riding back. It's over by Lancaster. We're riding back Lancaster to Circleville, and the game is kind of getting started on the radio as we're riding back. Everybody that was kind of in our little group said, let's get a shower and let's get to Columbus. And so we get a shower, we get to Columbus, we're driving around. I parked the car in the stadium lot, and in the third quarter, they'd stopped taking tickets, and we walked right into the stadium. So the game began while we're on our way back from Bloom Carroll in the car. Everybody took a shower. Halftime, we're driving to Columbus, parked directly next to the stadium, walked right in, and when the thing ended, we were all on the field celebrating 22-13 when Ronnie Harmon, the ball carrier, tackled by Chris Spielman, no gain, first down, Ohio. Game over, boys.
Wasn't it a rainy game?
What's that?
That game, was there rain at that game?
Oh yeah. It was steady rain. And we went to my friend's, the guy who graduated the year before us had a apartment near campus. So we went over to his house after that, and we all stayed overnight over there at his place, and it rained all night long. Like it just kept on raining the whole day, but people were out celebrating in it, and High Street was a disaster. And yeah, as you can imagine, it was a mess, but it was an Ohio State mess. That's for sure.
It was one of those games where they got an early blocked kick for a safety, and it just had that feel of, okay, they're going to do this. They're going to be able to pull this off. And yeah, Chuck Long couldn't do anything. And Ohio State, had they pulled off what Yakov's looking at, they didn't need to go undefeated necessarily. That would have obviously helped in a vote. But even if they had a loss, let's say the one they had earlier in the season would have beat Wisconsin, would have beat Michigan, and then go to the Rose Bowl and actually would have played the UCLA team that thumped Ronnie Harmon in Iowa.
Yeah, 85. Unbelievable. Coming up on 40 years. Unbelievable.
Yeah, it sure is. All right, guys. We do appreciate all that you do here. Tony, what is going on with you this week?
I actually just wrote a story about James Peoples, talked with him and talked to Carlos Lachlan back before the Rose Bowl. And so wrote that up about his freshman year, learning from Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson, and Lachlan's thoughts on what we could see from James Peoples this year. So you can find that at BuckeyeHuddle.com. I'll also have something else today about another one of the freshmen. And I wrote about Lincoln Keenholz yesterday. So you can find stories like that at BuckeyeHuddle.com.
Steve.
Yeah, I did one yesterday on Jermaine Matthews, the ultra confident sophomore cornerback who will be back for his junior year this coming season. He's got 27 games of experience, but has never started for Ohio State. And that figures to change when they open against Texas. He played over half the snaps, I believe, during the course of the 4-game playoff. He played 40% of the snaps over the course of the 16-game season. So he has got a ton of experience, and he does not lack for confidence, not one bit. And how confident is this guy? A sophomore, theoretically backup. Tim Walton said we consider him a starter. There are pictures of him walking around with that championship trophy on the field, after the game. He's like, give me that thing. I helped earn this thing. So, this guy, he's a lot of fun to talk to and going to be a lot of fun to watch the next year, maybe 2 years at Ohio State at corner. I did a story about him. And that really, we've done a ton of those, just like Tony has talked about. I was counting them up today. We've done Julian Sayin. We did a Mylan Graham story. The Armstrong twins are kind of an intriguing group there. Neither of them got to play this year, but both of them have tremendous potential. Will be in the running perhaps for 2 deep coming up in 2025. So, spring's not starting for almost another month, but we are, keeping the hot stove lid warm there with stuff on a lot of these up and coming Buckeyes in the next few weeks as well.
We've got the Ole Miss Live show next here on the network, 2 p.m. Eastern time. And we've got our college football show, the college football show, Monday through Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern time. I'm going to be looking at ACC TV ratings today. And if you missed it, the Ohio State-Michigan debate was a fun one, an absurd one at times. And that was on Monday night. So check it out. A lot of interesting facts were discovered and brought to the surface by yours truly. All right. We will give Michigan the first 40 years. Absolutely. Take it away. Since then, not close. Not close.
There you go.
All right, folks. We appreciate you being here. We'll see you back next week.